Welcome to the Motherhood Uncut podcast. In this podcast, Deb Rubin and I, Kate Kripke, bring to you all those conversations that, you might have with your best friend or your sister or someone that you're just needing to talk about the real stuff in motherhood with. We're going to bring to you conversations that are going to make you laugh. We love to laugh. Probably make you cry, and cry in the best of ways, move you, inspire you, help you feel seen and validated and less alone, because from where Deb and I sit, none of us should mother alone. Please pull up a chair, grab a cup of tea, coffee, a glass of wine, put in your earbuds, go for a walk. And if you are inspired by these conversations, both conversations that Deb and I have, just the two of us, and also really incredible interviews that we have with other experts and specialists in the field of mental health and maternal well-being and women's health. If you find these worthwhile, please share with a friend, because the reality is we really want to make sure that those moms out there who need a community and who could be uplifted or supported in any way that they find us. So thanks for being here. We cannot wait to mother with you.
Hey everyone, this is Deb. This week, Kate and I had the opportunity to talk with Michelle Hands. She is an incredible woman who has spent the last 17 years working as a construction engineer in a traditionally male-dominated industry. At some point, she started to share her stories about her trials and tribulations and strengths that she learned from being in this job. And it has evolved into this incredible platform where she inspires women all the time how to get out of their own way and forge their own path and be these independent women that don't have to fall into a box. Anyway, she has a podcast. She sells tons of merch. She has a YouTube channel. She is a public speaker. I'm going to let the interview speak for itself, but we loved talking with her. We learned so much, and I hope you enjoy the show. Have a great day.
Hey listeners, it's Kate. So for our listeners, I am offering up a 30-minute free call. Zoom is ideal, so I can see your beautiful faces, so that I can chat with you about what you might need to access the kind of emotional and mental well-being that you are wanting in motherhood, both for yourself, right? So you can feel better, and also for your kiddos, of course, because what we know is that when we are healthy, we mother better. So find a link in the show notes. Come hang with me for a little bit, and let's figure out what you might need to access that kind of life that you are really wanting. I really hope to see you, and there's nothing to lose. Pop on a call with me. I'll see you there.
Hey everyone, this is Deb. Oh, as we all know, the mother-daughter connection is like no other. It is intense and special and instrumental in both the lives of the mothers and the daughters. However, we know it can also be complex and challenging and even toxic at times. And when suddenly understanding your daughter can feel like the biggest challenge ever, we can feel scared and alone and disoriented. But I'm here to help. I have just launched my fall workshops, and I have a few different options, which I'm really excited about. You can check them out on my website at motherdaughterjourney.co. What I want to tell you is that I'm offering a few day-long immersive retreats, and I'm also offering a virtual deep dive on specific topics. The day-long options are hosted on Fridays, and if you're from out of town, you can make it a weekend in beautiful Boulder, where you can explore our majestic mountains and trails, eat amazing food, and just enjoy the Boulder lifestyle. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any questions. If you go to my website, again, motherdaughterjourney.co, you can schedule a free information session, and I really look forward to hearing from you. Have a beautiful day.
Michelle, we are so psyched to have you here for so many reasons. So welcome to the Motherhood Uncut podcast. One of the things that Deb and I were really excited about when we first learned about you was first of all, you're just amazing. We liked you within like the first 2 minutes of meeting you on the screen, but your life story and what you do for a living, and your mom, obviously, and also your commitment to really staying steady to what you know to be true about you in life and not have to sacrifice those things because you're a woman and a mother. And so that sounds very vague. We're going to have you jump in, but can you introduce yourself more formally? Tell our listeners who you are, what you do in the world, and then we'll just keep asking you questions and we'll go from there.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah. So my name is Michelle and I'm in the UK, and I've worked for 17 years in the construction industry. And I guess that's kind of what's led me to the journey to where I am today. So at the moment, I'm still part-time in construction as an engineer. I do content creation, but along the journey, I guess I hate the word, but a bit of an influencer, because there aren't many women in construction. And so now I just spend my days trying to help other women and try and educate people about the industry, the culture, and how we need to change it. And we need more women in the industry, and we need more women to just think, I can do that, and whatever it is that they want to do in life, to go ahead and forge their own path is kind of my motto, as well as she who dares wins. And yeah, I just want to encourage people to step outside the comfort zone, because I did it for a huge amount of time unknowingly, that I was kind of forging my own path, and it set me free a little bit, even though it was quite a difficult journey.
Wow, I love that. You are speaking for women that could potentially be stuck or getting in their own way.
Yeah.
Would you mind just launching in and telling us your story of how you got to this place?
I also I want to tell you what's happening in my brain as you're talking, because I think you're going to go into this with Deb's question. And I imagine our listeners, like, I have an image of a construction worker in my head.
Right.
And it is not a woman, and it's certainly not a pregnant woman who's going home to her children. So I would also love for you to, when you tell your story, to sort of define what is a construction worker. And I think there are all kinds of stereotypes around that, but I want to make sure our listeners are all on the same page about what we're talking about here.
Yeah, sure. So my story is, I suppose, a little bit less conventional. So I left university. I did a degree in geography in the UK, and I actually wanted to be an actress. So crazy enough, I decided as soon as I finished university to fly to Los Angeles and to train to become an actress. And when I got there, I realized that I actually wasn't very good. And I was probably more interested in the storytelling. So I came back home, and reality hit that I needed to earn some money. And a friend of my brother's said, okay, you have some sort of skill here to perhaps go into the construction industry, but into a quality assurance role. So I ended up going, I say, from rags to riches, but it's the other way around. I kind of went from Hollywood to ending up on a landfill site. Yeah. So I'm not going, you guys call them landfill sites?
Yeah.
What's a landfill site?
We call them construction site.
Yeah, construction
site.
No.
So you know where all your waste goes?
Yes,
landfill.
Landfill.
Yeah.
The garbage.
Garbage. That's it, right? Okay. So I started work on one of those, and basically just was working on several different sites up and down the UK, just not knowing what I was doing, completely winging it. But really enjoying it because I could travel in between, and I still had an interest in film. So I was making short films on the side and realizing that I had a passion for storytelling. Now, whilst I was working in construction, I switched after about 6 years into engineering, which meant I was on proper construction sites. So my job was to read drawings and show guys and peg out. So like hammering stuff in and show them where to build stuff and how to build on site. So it was very much, I have to fight this because lots of guys on social media are like, oh, I bet she works in an office. No, I was down doing hard labor.
You had a hard hat on.
Yeah. I was with the guys on site. Yeah. Every day. There was no nice office. I was on site every day. So I did this for, up until last year, I was on a construction site. And then the last couple of years, so my eldest is 5 years old. And what happened whilst I was working construction is I started sharing stories about how hard the culture is, how tough it is to kind of be a woman on your own on a landfill site. And I was explaining to my friends all the things I was experiencing, and they were like, Michelle, this is not normal. And I was like, what do you mean? They were like, they had normal jobs, so I say normal, and they were like, it's not normal to be working with, you know, a sex offender or someone that's just come out of prison for doing manslaughter, or, you know. And I was like, oh, right, okay. And because I'd only ever been in the industry, I didn't know anything else, and I started to look around and think, I've not ever worked with another woman on site. And so things started to click, and then the storytelling, the passion for that came in. And so then that's when I really started on socials with Instagram and YouTube. I used to film myself on site, and to this day, all of the people, all the companies I used to work for had no idea that I was filming. And I wasn't filming the guys, I was just doing a vlog. So I was like, here's me on site. And I wanted to expose to other women that the job could be available to them as well. So that got really fun. I got connected to lots of people all over the world, because lots of other women in construction would contact me and say, I feel the same. I've had the same experiences on my own. Thanks for sharing. And then lots of other women started to connect that weren't in construction, but also were in the same situation, you know, in other career paths. And then that's how She Who Dares Wins was born, because one day someone said to me, you know, like, it's been a rough ride, but why do you keep doing it? And I do absolutely love the job. Like, as much as I talk about the dark side of things, I love the industry. And I just said, you know, She Who Dares Wins. Like, you just got to keep going. And so that's how that was born. And then when I got pregnant with my first son, I wanted to document to see if I could be a mom and work in construction. And if the story ended with me being pushed out, then that would be the story. But if it didn't, then hopefully it would guide others coming through that, you know, it can be done. So then I had my second during COVID lockdown. And because we were allowed to work on site, I actually worked until I was like 36 weeks.
Wow.
So yeah. And we had a heat wave. For England, it was hot. Nowhere else. But yeah, so I worked, and the national newspapers picked up on it, and they went with, you know, builder pregnant on site. And yeah, I've always just wanted to show others that it can be done, but also I tell the hard truth. So I'm not afraid to speak out on how bad it can be and things.
What are some of those hard truths that you experienced on site?
So the industry does attract, you know, it's difficult to say this without, I don't want to offend people, but it does attract a certain type of male when they're coming in to do like labor jobs. And I think everyone deserves, you know, a second chance, but there are a lot of, you know, ex-offenders that come into the industry, and you're not made aware of it. And I think because employers have not had a lot of women working in the past, it's not really thought about. So I've been in a field in the middle of nowhere, where it's just myself and a worker we're working on, we're doing drilling, and there's no one for miles. And then this guy just says to me, you know, I've just done 15 years for murdering someone. And I'm 23 and just like, okay. And there's quite a few of those situations where I've been quite lucky, but I hear, and it's heartbreaking, lots of stories from women that have messaged me over the years that haven't been lucky, and there's been sexual assault, and there's been some really dark things that have happened, and they get brushed under the carpet. Often the woman gets moved because they don't know how to deal with things. A lot of women that have gone through the same thing as me have been pregnant on site. They just get asked to stop working, or they don't get supported. So it's hard. And I think I was extremely lucky that I was a freelance engineer. So I only ever worked for myself, working for contracts. So if I didn't like a contract, I would move. Mm-hmm. But I know people that are employed by companies can't do that. So it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I hear you describing and naming here, you know, and there's of course, you know, we are a population where stereotypes abound. And so, you know, I think we're naming here that there's a stereotype here and a generalization, and you've had very real experiences that have sort of fit into some of this. But one of the things I hear you describing is that you are a woman in an industry where there are a lot of powerful, strong men, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so the sort of what I hear you, and the question is, and I imagine this sort of dynamic is, okay, what does it look like to be doing your job where you want to feel an equal to, right?
Yeah.
And the job is in relationship with, again, you've got to be strong to be in construction, right?
Yeah.
And so you're a woman who is potentially also declining in strength as you become 36 weeks pregnant because you're making a little human in your body, and you're surrounded by these other workers who are stronger and more powerful for you than you. And I think that's an interesting dynamic for women, for no matter what the industry is what does it look like to show up in a steady way in that dynamic?
To be honest with you, that's kind of like that's the most memorable part of my career, is being heavily pregnant. So I during my first son's when I was growing him, I moved into project management, and it felt so empowering. And I used to joke with the guys and say, I'm building two things at once. What's your superpower?
Yeah, I love that.
You know what? It was like I was growing a human. I was so empowered by that, especially the first time round. And then also building a project. Like it was the first time I decided to take on project management when I'd never done it before when I was pregnant. So hormones flying around. But I think I was incredibly lucky that time round. Well, in both times actually, that I had very supportive guys. So I talk about, the industry and the dark side of it, but a good 80% of my career has been amazing. And I've worked with some incredible guys that have looked after me wholeheartedly. And during those times was when I was pregnant. So yeah, it was very empowering. And that's, I think your body kind of goes into, when I felt like when I was pregnant, my body went into like a survival, but almost like a powerhouse. And it didn't come with problems, you're like, I was huge. My first one, and so like even bending down to pick up a hammer was hard. But I think it's amazing what your body can endure. And now my biggest comeback to guys is like, I've been through labor. Like,
Nothing you do is going to relate to that.
No, and the pain, and like there is just nothing physically. When they're like, oh yeah, but women can't physically, I'm like, don't even go there with the physical side of things, because no.
That's beautiful. All right, I have a question. So you really had like extreme different passions, right? This actress performing and that whole world in LA, and then to like this rugged, kind of just gritty badass is what I'm feeling. Is that accurate?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay. So you were talking about being with people that deserve a second chance and that might seem seemingly scary. What can you tell us something that you learned about yourself just being in situations with people that are seemingly scary? Like how you would respond and just how you noticed yourself?
Yeah. So that's my dishwasher beeping. Can I
just good. We're uncut here. We're good.
One second.
I think this is the first time in a podcast that someone's gotten up to turn the dishwasher off.
You've got to do the dishwasher, yeah. There's a dishwasher. Otherwise it's just going to be beeping. Yeah, so totally. I think I've inherited from my dad that I kind of thrive in social situations, in terms of I just love speaking to people from all walks of life. And I've been able to do that in this job. You are exposed to so many different characters, and that's what I love about it. And I think the full circle of trying to be an actress and the love of storytelling really did come full circle, because the one thing when I was training, they were saying, you've got to bring all your life experiences into these characters. And I didn't really have that. I had a very privileged upbringing, and working in construction gave me that. I learned so many things from working with guys, and from learning about people's backgrounds and how to overcome things. And I also kind of have a wicked sense of humor, so people say. So for me, it was a good way to, I suppose, exchange words with people and just have a good time. Like, the industry has a very fun side to it. So it is extremely dangerous. It is very, very fast paced. It's rewarding. And I think there's quite a lot of stress involved at all levels on a construction site. So when you throw that into the mix and you throw all these personalities, you either sink or swim. And in fact, the first job I ever had, the guy said to me, he was like, "You've got 2 weeks." He said, "You've got to prove yourself in 2 weeks, otherwise you're gone." And that was an ultimate challenge for me. And ever since then, it's felt like it's just on this constant, trajectory of just the next job and meeting more people. And I did have a period where I think I lost myself, lost my identity, and I tried too much to blend in and go into some jobs. You go into like a survival mode, and I didn't really like who I'd become. And then I think with age, you mature a bit and you realize I don't need to be blending in. I can be myself. And if people don't like that, then they can, go elsewhere.
Oh, wow. Hallelujah.
That is like such a metaphor of mothering. Right?
Well, I was so funny because I was sitting here hearing you describe construction.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, it's actually such a metaphor for what motherhood is. I mean, motherhood isn't inherently dangerous the way a construction site might be, but we certainly feel like a lot of things in mothering are dangerous, right? So it's unpredictable. There's a lot of quote unquote heavy lifting, right? There's a need to be resilient to the all-time stress coming in. There's so many different parts. There's the anxiety,
high stress,
the high stress, right? Like, we could go on. And I guess that leads me to really wonder something. In what ways do you think you brought the skills you learned on a construction site into your mothering site?
I don't know, like, to be honest with you, motherhood is a rough ride. Like,
Yeah.
I have, I think I had a rough year post-COVID. So not last year, the year before, in between my two sons, where I struggled. And I think it was just that realization that you have two humans to look after. And I've never, when people used to say to me, "Are you going back to work?" I'd be honest and say, yeah, because running a construction site or doing anything in that field is so much easier than being a mom. Yeah. And that's why that's why I'm really passionate actually about getting more women into the industry, because the skills that you get as a mom that you have no choice but to get, managing, multitasking, figuring out the crap and then just doing exactly what you need to do, can really work for any other career. So when someone says, "Oh, when you've become a mother, your brain turns to mush and you can't go into," no, I would say if it was reverse and you became a mother and then you went in, we would just fly, because the skill set is so vast. But it's also that figuring it out. Like, I felt like my 20s and 30s, I was like, okay, I've got this construction figured out now, I'm comfortable. And then I became a mom and I was just like,
not comfortable.
No, and it doesn't ever come, does it?
You talked about how one of the things you brought to the construction site that helped you relate to the other construction workers and to get through was humor and having fun. And of course, motherhood, if we can't have humor and we can't find a sense of play, we're going to get burned out real fast. So I think it's like, so I guess we could go either way, right? You're mothering, you get to bring all of that into the construction work, and also what you needed to do, what you brought. It sounds like it's true of yourself, it's inherent in you, but what you brought from yourself to the construction site to make it work, I imagine, is also something you had to find in this hard job as mothering to make it work. Is that accurate?
Yeah, completely. And what's also been quite a nice shift is working predominantly with men. I have a good group of friends, but since leaving university, they kind of spread out over the country. And I never really had a strong group of really close friends. And yet, as soon as I became a mother, that changed.
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, like, and that's been so nice for me, because I guess I was in this, like, I'm independent, like I've got close friends, but I don't really need. And then, school moms, moms where my children are the same age, I just feel like it's opened me up, mainly because I think you need that support system.
Yes,
Someone that's been through it. And that's been incredible. So it's been a real nice turnaround now. I think I'm a little bit softer in my approach to dealing with people. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned from being a mom that I take into my work now is empathy. Trying to have, more empathy for people, and not just shutting people down if I don't agree with how they're doing something. Yeah, it's tough. There's no manual for motherhood though, so I'm still totally figuring it out.
No, but you are sort of, well, we're all figuring it out every day. You said some really key things. So you said community without saying that word, like, and to be able to ask for help and have, instant people that you need in a different way. I think that is like number one on the manual for mothering.
Yeah.
And just what you just said, this empathy piece, I actually heard empathy in your voice the moment you started speaking around working with these men, right? That kind of can be characterized in like the negative world, which we know is just one part of their life. It might have been one really bad choice. It doesn't define them, right? Decisions that get you to places. But I think that when we can really practice empathy with ourselves, with our kids, with other parents, it's like, it does this thing where you said it softens you. I agree with you. When I can live in that place, it just softens everything. It like just makes it a little more watercolor of an image, and I think that's like so important. Yeah. I'm left with another question, and that was when you said you lost your identity for a little bit, which I think happens to, I think so many of our listeners can relate to. Would you mind sharing about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I went through a year of, it was, well, I'll say what it was at the end, but I went through a period of time where I started to have kind of like chest pains, and I had like cameras down and lots of tests, and I went into this whirlwind of there's something seriously wrong with me. And went to the doctors, and it was like, okay, you've got acid reflux, take these tablets. And I went on like this spiral of 9 months of there's something wrong. And at the end of it, I just started to change my lifestyle. And now looking back on it, I realized that it was all stress. And I thought I was this powerhouse. I was like, I've been in construction, like I there's no other industry that's as stressful as that. And then I've gone through labor, I've gone through COVID, like the stress is something that doesn't touch me.
Yeah.
And then I ended up in hospital thinking that I was having like a heart attack. And the doctor just basically said to me, it was like, talk to me about, and he was like the first person after all the other doctors, he was like, talk to me about what it is that you do. And I was like, okay. So at the time I just bought a second house to renovate, because I thought that was a great idea to do with 2 kids and 2 businesses. My husband was like pulling his hair out. So I got 2 businesses, 2 kids under 4, and a house that I personally was renovating. And he was like, do you think it might be stress?
It's so interesting how so many of us who think of ourselves as capable and strong, that it's our body that tells us that we're stressed before our mind, right? Like, you may not have, quote unquote, felt stressed, right? Because you were just doing what you know how to do, which is pretty badass in and of itself, right? And then your body was the part of you that said, you have to stop.
Yeah.
I think that's really typical.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been in construction, but I would say that happens for me. Like I can,
Well, you push through.
I push through, but I guess I mean, like you might say to me, how's your stress level? And I might be like, totally fine. And then I'll be like, but my back really hurts. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, my body's telling me that I'm stressed before I'm aware of it cognitively and intellectually. I think that happens for a lot of people.
I think it does. It's like the brain overrides it.
Yeah. Especially when you have a vision of yourself and a self-identity, like you're talking about.
Yeah. And that kind of crumbled. Then I was like, I can't, maybe I'm not who I thought I was. Maybe I'm not as strong. And then, having 2 kids and also both my labors, I think I was like, no, I've got through it. But both my labors were very they were terrible, to be honest. Both were forceps, lost a lot of blood. So 2 really kind of like horrific labors. After the first one, they were like, oh, the second one won't be like that. And then it was. I was just like, wow. So I think all of that crammed in, and then I guess the stress of still being in the industry and still trying to do everything as well, crumbled. And then it's been a bit like building myself back up from that and slowing down and enjoying. Like, I think at times I was in a rush to go back to work to prove that things could be done. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, spending time with my boys was so rewarding. And I had the luxury of being able to do that because my husband's got a very good job that, he has a lot of spare time as well. So it's just a case of slowing down, which I know is incredibly hard for some women. I know you guys in the US, you barely have maternity leave.
No, slowing down in the US is like shamed.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's like one of the only cultures that we don't have a siesta. Although I make siesta.
But you're right. There's like 6 weeks maternity leave. We have 6 weeks maternity leave. And actually not all businesses even pay for all 6 weeks. No, I mean, it's really, really bad. You know what Michelle has reminded me of, Deb, is this conversation we just had in our most recent podcast about our kids, about how we can have an idea. We're talking about, Michelle, about how as moms, as parents, we can have an idea of who our kids are and unintentionally lock them in that box, right? Like, well, my kid's so easy, or my kid is the artist, or my kid is the whatever, the sleeper, right? Or whatever the thing is. And then it doesn't give our kids room to be multidimensional, full human beings. And that's part of what I hear you saying. You had such an image of yourself. I am the woman construction worker. I am the badass. I get crap done. And then the moment you started feeling more human, right? The moment you started experiencing the multiple parts of yourself, it didn't fit in to this definition of you had of yourself. Yeah. And it's almost like that's where the stress occurred, right? Yeah. It's like this almost sounds like the stress built up when you pushed away all these very normal human experiences you were having that you didn't see as having any place in your self-identity.
Yeah. And I think it's a really interesting point, and it's something that's embedded in me now to think about with my own boys. Like you say, we have this idea of where they want to go, and it's kind of restricted. I didn't know that I could have a career in construction. I fell into it. And actually, I've spoken to my son's teacher, and they do some really interesting research, and they basically discovered that from quite an early age that girls don't consider any of these careers that they can do, and half the time it's because the parents don't have that conversation. Right. And it's hard, isn't it? Because you see, like my youngest, he's just about to be 3, and he's very good with a ball, and I was like, oh, he's going to be into sport. And then, like, for me, that's been really hard because I did construction for so long, and now I'm doing different things. Like, I'm starting a podcast as well, and I'm writing more and doing more artistic things. And it's really opened my eyes that, we should be telling our kids or not even telling them, just kind of lead their own path. But then the mother instinct is like, oh, you know, maybe you should. And I saw it with my own parents. It's hard. And they said, you will never understand until you become a parent. Like, we just want you to be safe, but to also experience, you know, it was like, go to university. University probably wasn't the best place for me. But it took me on the journey, and then being stuck in one career maybe wasn't the best place for me. And now I think we see a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds that are experiencing this midlife crisis, that used to be like the 40 plus. And it's because society tells us to do, you know, like, I felt like I had to go back straight into construction and continue on that journey. And I think it's a really interesting conversation to have. And I see now, what's interesting is I've had 2 boys, which I always knew was the case. I was going to be surrounded by men. There was never going to be I just knew it. I just knew it. And I wasn't going to go for a third, because it'd be a third boy. And for me, it's really interesting when I watch little girls and I watch parents with little girls, and the whole, I've even done it myself. I've been like, oh, such a pretty dress. And you're like, you know, that's the things that are said, that if we didn't say those things and we just said, you know, like, oh, you threw that ball really amazingly, or you did, you know, like, you climbed with great resilience. It's hard, but I think there's so much more we can do. And I'm hoping as a parent, I know I will, because I think it's just something you do, but I'm trying really hard to restrict on, I guess what we do is we narrow the options for them, in order to try and protect.
And it's just about paying attention. And it sounds like you're really committed to paying attention to when you unintentionally keep your sort of mold your kids in a direction. Because we mold our kids
we genderize
for better, for worse.
Yeah,
we genderize, but we also mold, just based on our other conversation. Like, character. If I focus on my kid's art all the time and say, you're so great at art, and I don't focus on something else, she might be more likely to go into art. So we're doing this all the time without paying attention.
I actually had, it was my first kind of parenting, like, light bulb moment a couple of months ago. So talking to the moms and the kids over here, they start on stages with books, and I was always left behind as a kid. And I realized that my son had been on these colored books for so long, and I was like, he's not moving on and he's getting bored. But I don't want to be that parent that's like typing in every week to the teacher. We all know who they are. And I was like, that's not going to be me. I'm not going to do that. But it got to a point where he was getting bored of reading, and lots of other parents were talking about different colored books. And then you're like, well, why isn't he up there? Like, is that, you know, does he need to be on that next level? And then I was like, oh no, I'm being a pushy parent. But I sent the email, and so my son was sent home with the harder books. And on that first night, we started reading them, and I was getting really frustrated with him because he wasn't reading properly, but he was tired, and I was like, oh no. He got really upset, and I was like, oh, okay, you don't have to read anymore. And I remember coming down to my husband and saying, I've messed up. And he was like, why? I was like, because I thought, because of social pressures, that he needed to be moved on and didn't want him left behind, and I intervened. And now, like, he used to love reading, now he hates reading. And what I actually did was sat down with him the next day and apologized, and it was really humbling. I was just like, I'm really sorry that I did that, and if you don't want to read, that's totally cool. Like, we just won't, we won't read. And if you want to go back to the other books, let's do that. Or if you just want to give reading a miss for a while. And he gave me a hug, and he was like, that's okay. It's okay that you did that. And then my husband on the evening read to him, and he read beautifully and perfect these harder books. But for me, that was a kind of like, yeah, you've got to know as a parent when to rein it in, and it's hard. But yeah, that was quite, so I do apologize to my kids quite a lot.
Oh, there's so many wins in that story. I just have to like point out a few, because that was so beautiful. First, I think that projection of our own trauma, we put on our kids unconsciously all the time. And that's the point of these conversations, is like Kate just said, is to just be aware, to notice it, because we're doing it all the time. And then to go repair, which you did so beautifully, to a 5-year-old who will feel you coming down to his level and being like, hi, I made a mistake. I mean, I think that I think that is actually getting really common in the parenting world now, where a long time ago it was so unheard of, but it's like this thing that most people can really understand and conceptualize and bring into practice, of like owning it, right? Owning it. You're human, that you're imperfect, and you got caught up and tangled up with your story around reading and being left behind, and put it on him. And then there was other wins, but the last one I want to name is, then your husband came in and had no energy around it, right?
Yeah.
And then he had a different experience. And then it's like, oh my God, it's like such a reminder of how much we unconsciously bring into a situation.
Yeah.
So
And I think
sharing
the thing for me as well is like realizing when you become an adult, whether that be like 18, or I guess I probably feel like an adult in my 30s, but you realize that your parents don't know it all. And I think growing up, you always see them as they're a source of information, they know everything. And actually, I quite like my kids to, not always, but to challenge me when the time's right. Obviously, that's a hard line to play when they're little, because we're still figuring out as well. So we're there to guide them, but only through our own eyes and our own experiences. And actually, their experiences are going to be very different, and they're going to learn different things, and they may want to go into different avenues, and they may challenge, our perceptions that we have now in the future. And that's great. So that's kind of something that I'm overly aware of as well, is that, don't always it's guidance, isn't it? But without putting pressure on of, my opinion is right. Like, they need to go out and be able to discover that for themselves.
Oh, that is really the story of my life right now.
I think that the statement, they're the two of the most powerful statements for us to be able to make in relationship with ourselves, but also with other people, are I'm sorry and I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think we think that strength comes from never making mistakes, so never needing to say you're sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So never being vulnerable, right? And also having all the answers.
Yeah.
But I think really what we learn as moms is that we make a ton of mistakes all the time. So the first one's out the window. And we don't really know much of anything. We're in a constant state of not knowing. So it's a really interesting place to begin to see those two things as brave and strong versus, weak and failure-based or whatever.
Totally.
I actually am aware of something that, because we're really talking about modeling for our kids, right? And I'm so curious to know, I know that you're sort of not just doing construction right now, you're doing other things as well, but you're modeling a lot to your two boys, being them having a mother who's sort of breaking boundaries and expectations in her career path, and who is, unwilling to quote unquote just do what's expected of her, and instead step into a way of being in the world that's in line with what you want versus what people think you should want. And I think that's really powerful. We both have daughters, and we talk a lot about, as women, what are we modeling to our girls who will be women? But I think it's interesting to think about, as a woman, what you're modeling to your boys who will know women, who will become involved in women, whether it's romantically or not, right? Do you ever think about that as a mom in construction?
I do. Yeah, and what I find quite interesting is my husband Tom, he is incredibly empathetic, and my son had his report from the first year at school the other night, and he was in tears. And I was like, what's wrong? And he was like, no, I'm just so happy. I'm just so happy that he has got where he has. And both him and his brother, it's kind of a role reversal in my house. So I've gone out and worked on a construction site, and he does the cooking. He's very motherly with our children, and he's so like empathetic, and he's really, really the soft side of the relationship, which is completely different to the whole industry that I've been in and men that I've been surrounded with. He doesn't, you know, have an ego, none of that. He's incredibly grounded and has utmost respect for women, which I guess has come from, you know, the way he was brought up and the way that his parents, the values that his parents gave him. So my boys, I don't ever look at them as, I guess, like you said, it's quite a nice thing that they see me kind of like forging my own path and doing what aligns with what I want to do. Because I always look at him as a super role model for them. And yeah, like it's funny because people will come to the house and they'll be like, oh, is that your dad's truck on the drive? And they're like, no, that's my mom's. And then they're like, oh, right, is like your mom cooking the dinner? And they're like, no, she's an awful cook, it's my dad. So in the house, it's so flipped upside down that I think it's great, because I think just naturally I'm hoping that they will not have the stereotypical, you know, I'm the one literally last minute putting clothes into the washing machine saying, you know, I forgot to wash the bed sheets, and he's got the diary down. He knows when the kids are doing activities at school, the lunches, like he has the mom. And actually joke that my youngest Teddy, we realized that my husband was able to have 3 months maternity full pay, because he's a university lecturer. So when Teddy was born, I had started the business, so I was kind of working part-time, and he had Teddy for 3 months, and Teddy thinks he came out of Tom.
Wow, I love it.
The bond is so strong, to a point where I'm like, hey, just to prove we're inside me. Yeah.
But you're teaching your boys what to expect from women. You know,
no, there's no boxes.
Exactly. And I think there is, you know, I think that's what we do. We did an interview with our husbands about raising daughters, men raising daughters. And we talked in that interview about how, you know, their relationship with our daughters in many ways is teaching our daughters what to expect in relationships with men. And that's sort of the same thing, right? In many ways, you're teaching your sons what to expect in relationships with women. And you're showing up as this woman who's, you know, forging her own path and doing what she loves and, you know, being independent and self-created. And what an amazing thing to teach upcoming citizens of the world who happen to be men around how to think of women. It's so just amazing.
Yeah. And I think I've got a few friends where the husbands have taken a step back in their careers to help with the kids.
Yeah.
And the women have gone on led and really defied that, you know, normal perception of the woman stays at home and looks after the kids. And actually it's been really positive from what I've seen, especially ones that have had girls, because I think they don't see the fear of you get a career and then it all comes tumbling down. Like, I think, yes, I think it is really important. It's quite unique, but maybe that will be something that will change in the future.
Wow, thank you. This has been just amazing. And I just think you are, like we've said, you're breaking glass ceilings and you're changing gender roles up. And, you know, we've been talking very much in a hetero relationship context, but like, this is really about feminism and sexism and breaking it all down. And so thank you for doing the work you do so much. A lot of times we like to end a lot of our interviews by asking, how do you take care of yourself? What are some of your little tools that you can share with our listeners about how you tend to you?
Okay, so this has changed a lot recently. I've changed my eating habits, so just try to eat real clean, take time for myself. I, you know, enjoy reading, so I take time to read. I actually, you know, went a couple of months ago it was like a Shoe Des Wins challenge, but I was like, I'm just going to go out on my own to the cinema. And that was really cool. So I think taking time to rebalance has been a priority for me, as well as like the 3 core, which is sleep. With kids, that's so hard. Sleep, eat, and exercise. And I'm not going to say to people out there that I've got it all nailed, because I don't. But I think it's become, the simple things in life have become more important. I'm 40 next year, and I realized that I have to start taking care of myself.
What a beautiful, beautiful way to wrap up. I just noticed that your last name is Hands. I think I knew that, but I'm seeing it on the screen. And I'm always giggle when people have last names that sort of directly tell a story in their lives. And so I also just want to say that, Michelle Hands, you have really shown the women out there how to use their hands in life, right?
Yeah.
So kudos to you.
Is why I kept it, because my husband's name is Cornby, and I was like, I'm not changing my name to that. I'm keeping
That's a good one. Hands is a good one.
Yeah.
Well, tell our listeners how we can find you, what's next, what's next for you.
So what's next for me? I'm She Who Dares Wins across all platforms, and I love connecting with other women like yourself. So for me, my third season, the podcast has been a slow burner, and it's not actually been going for the last year. I'm relaunching it with a studio, having guests in, and having women from all different industries, things that you wouldn't even think of, fighter pilots.
Amazing.
Wonderful.
Tell us what it's called. What's your podcast called?
It's She Who Dares Wins. So yeah, it's all within the branding, and I'm excited to kind of get that launched. And yeah, I just love connecting with people and learning. So I'm still on this learning trajectory, and by chatting to other women, that's going to hopefully help myself and then others.
Amazing. She Who Dares Wins.
And I just love the concept for that podcast. I can't wait to dive in.
Me
will have
too.
everything in the show notes. Any final thoughts of words of wisdom? We talk a lot on this podcast about mama mentors and how we all share our ideas with people. Any final thoughts for any of our listeners?
I guess if most of your listeners are kind of mothers, just say find your tribe if you can. I think that's been really important for me. And then give yourself time and listen to people like yourselves, because what you're doing is wonderful. You're giving not just advice, but stories that people can learn from, and I think that's amazing. So yeah, thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you,
Michelle.
So great to talk to you. Have a beautiful day.
I will do. Thanks very much, guys.
Bye-bye.
Hey, you guys, it's Kate. We really hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And if you did, go ahead and share it with a friend. It also would mean the world to me and Deb if you would take a minute and write a review. If this podcast makes you laugh, makes you cry in the best of ways, helps you feel less alone, gives you information that's useful to you in your mothering journey, if you write a review, it will make this more accessible to other mothers like you. So take a minute. We'd be so grateful. Thanks for being here.